if you've got more work to be done than you currently have staff on hand to handle, you've got a decision to make. Should you hire somebody or should you bring in consultants? Ben, I know you've done both. You've brought
I
in an
have.
agency,
I've hired a range of consultants and I've hired a range of people. So yeah, I'm here for this one.
A Larajob's partner, actually. And then you also decided to hire. So I'm curious, what made you want to hire, or in previous cases, it doesn't have to be this one specific case, but previously,
right.
What has sort of been that decision point for you, that sort of, which way do I go decision? I definitely want to bring in a consultant, want to bring in an agency versus, you know what, it's kind of time to hire my own team.
Right. So the first and maybe primary factor is how long is this project? How large is this project? How much time am I going to devote to it? And there's a tipping point where it's worth the investment of going through a hiring process and bringing someone on as a full employee, because it's going to be a while. They're going to be building this thing for a year, or they're going to be supporting it. On the other hand, if you have something where you think it's just a 3-month gig or shorter, that's not worth hiring someone. That's not worth all the time and energy it's going to take to find the right person. So the length of the project is probably the most critical, like step one. Do I need a consultant on this, or do I need to hire for this? Then, of course, cost is a big concern. I would expect to pay significantly more for a consultant than a actual employee. And so, again, if you're going to be paying someone to do this work, over the long run, that really tips in the favor of hiring someone. You're going to pay multiples of what you would pay in salary if you're hiring consultants to do the work.
Yeah.
However, even on a long project, I think that it can make sense to hire a consultant. And a few areas where I would do that is basically things that are outside of your competency. Either no one on your team knows how to do it, or it doesn't make sense to train someone to do it. That's a great time to bring in someone who's already just a rock star at that particular technology or that stack or that type of project. Bring them in, have them knock it out, and then you're done. You don't need to take care of that forever.
Yeah.
Another would be if you don't have the skills, but you need to develop the skills on your team, bringing consultants in that are in the teaching frame of mind, someone who can help you learn how things work, can get you off to a great foundational start that you and your team can carry forward. That can be a great time to spend some money on a developer to give you a real leg up, a jump start on a project, and inject some knowledge into your organization.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of goes along with what you're saying before, but what always comes to mind for me is what is the scope and what are the breadth of skills that I need, right? Because if you've got a project, maybe it's a particularly complicated project where it's like, going to need Laravel developers. I also need a designer. I've kind of got a mobile app in mind. Like you're starting to now now you're naming off all kinds of things. And that might be a good indicator that, first of all, you're not going to hire some unicorn, some like perfect position where it's like, because I'm sure you've seen job descriptions like this. I'm sure sometimes it's tempting to write a job description where it's like this, where it just becomes this wish list of like anything involving pixels. Basically, it's like, congratulations, it's on a computer screen. It's your job now. So that's not really realistic often, right? So if you have a project where there's actually quite a bit of things that you're going to need, then rather than try to hire somebody who's kind of good at this and kind of good at that and trying to patch it together, going with especially like an agency that's established, not just a single consultant, you get access to a whole wide array of things, right? Maybe you just need a mobile developer for 3 months, and then you need then you need a designer to kind of come in at this point and then leave and come back. These are all things that you can do with an agency that you could just never do if you were trying to do it yourself.
Right.
And the other thing I was going to say is and this is maybe my bias, right? I've worked for agencies before. I've also hired people, consultants. So I come at it from both sides. But if you don't know exactly what you want to do just yet, like you have like the seed of an idea and you need to do it maybe, but you don't exactly know how to get from point A to point B, getting help even before you go to that full step can be super helpful, right? Don't just like, I kind of know what I need. Let me get that job description out there. Let me just start hiring. Like you might need to like slow up a little bit, maybe even like find a consultant or find somebody who can help you even plan this out, think this through before you even realize what you're getting yourself into.
I think there are a couple of ways of taking that. You can have someone build a prototype, basically, which might be necessary for the next steps of your business's life cycle. So you might not need a developer to you might not need them on staff right now because you
Yeah.
need to build a prototype and then you need to prove it in a market, or you need to show it to investors, or whatever needs to happen before you really truly build the thing. Hiring a consultant to build that prototype without investing in a W-2 employee can make a lot of sense. And you also brought up a great point of agencies versus consultants. And I've
Consultants, right?
worked
Yeah.
with both, and
Yeah.
it's a totally different experience. So consider that. I would say with agencies, you tend to get a depth of knowledge and experience that you don't get with a single consultant. I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of value in the person I'm working with who's on my project has never seen this before, but they know they have a team of people they can ask. Has anyone
Right.
done this before? What's the best
Right.
package for this? What's the best approach? And that's value you get that you don't get with a consultant. You're probably going to pay more for it, but it is
Sure.
definitely a deeper well of knowledge that you're reaching into by bringing in consultants, bringing in an agency specifically over a consultant.
Yeah. It's so funny, right? A lot of this just comes down to like the classic, three-sided triangle. There's price, there's time, and there's scope, right? And
Mhm.
like, so all these are going to influence sort of which direction you go into. If you have a lot of time and maybe not a lot of money, you might want to be thinking about hiring in that case. You might even want it
Mhm.
anyway, right? Even if maybe you have more money than time, that might go in the other direction. But also, these don't have to be an either or choice, right? You could do
Right.
both. You could hire and work with consultants. You could start with a consultant and then transition
Mhm.
to hiring people. These aren't necessarily, singular choices.
Right. I've run a rather large hybrid team where I started with consultants and
Yep.
that went well. And in the meantime, that gave me a better sense of who I needed to hire, who I like to work with, what skills they needed. I hired a few people. Then we all worked together as a blended team of W-2 employees and consultants, and it was successful. So I'd recommend that path as well. That's definitely an option. And Dave, you mentioned something about consultants at the stage where you're not sure even who you need to hire yet. And I think
Yeah.
that in general, agency or consultant is definitely a time to bring in an expert, not
Yeah.
necessarily to write the code, but to work through the project with you and talk about what your options are for how this could be built, some possible stacks, the type of people you need to find. That can be a really valuable bit of cash to spend to give you the sense of who do I need to bring on longer term? Who do I need to hire? So you're paying for that knowledge, not necessarily paying for that code.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one of those things, like, you have to kind of be aware of your own, like, sort of what do I bring to the table? What does my current team bring to the table? What's missing?
Mhm.
If you don't feel like you have a good awareness of that, maybe you're new to your position, maybe you've inherited this team, you've got this project, and you get spun up. It's another great example where bringing in, whether it's a consultant in an agency, bringing in outside eyes, outside expertise can be helpful. Because here's the other thing: is you mentioned price, but the other thing is, if you don't quite know 100% what you want, frankly, it can just be easier to end a relationship with a consultant or an
Mhm.
agency than it is to fire a W-2 employee who you have
Right.
invested time in, you've gotten to know them,
Feels
they
very
rely on
different
you.
to end a
It feels
contract than it does
very,
to
very
lay
different
someone
that
off.
way.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.